90.5.
He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer and the champion of liberty, of human equality. Let's salute him, fellow Ghanaians, the nation's founder, Sajifo Kwame Nkrumah. May God bless him, Ghana showboy, Africa's great son, Sajifo Dr. Nkrumah.
Ago when you come with Makasa Kakra, and when you come when Tiam Kakra, Menkasapi. Damabara Makade Bakans Babukakran and Yamakan Fancy. At long last, the battle has ended. And thus, Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever. And here again, I want to take the opportunity to thank the chiefs and people of this country, the youth, the farmers, the women, who have so nobly fought and won this battle. Also, I want to thank the valiant ex-servicemen who have so cooperated with me in this mighty task of freeing our country from foreign rule and imperialism. And as I pointed out at our party conference at Sorbonne, I made it quite clear that from now on
I love Radio Gold 90.5.
we must change our attitudes, our minds. We must realize that from now on we are no more a colonial but a free and independent people. But also, as I pointed out, that also entails hard work. I am depending upon the millions of the country, the chiefs and people, to help me to reshape the destiny of this country. We are prepared to build it up and make it a nation that will be respected by every other nation in the world. We know we are going to have difficult beginnings, but again, I'm relying upon your support. I'm relying upon your hard work. Seeing you in these thousands, it doesn't matter how far my eye goes. I can see that you are here in your millions. And my last warning to you is that you ought to stand firm behind us so that we can prove to the world that when the African is given a chance, he can show to the world that he's somebody. We shall no more go back to sleep anymore. Today, from now on, there is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that, after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. We are going to demonstrate to the world, to the other nations, young as we are, that we are prepared to lay our own foundation. As I said in the assembly just a minute ago, I made it point that we are going to say that we create our own African personality and identity. It's the only way in which we can show the world that we are ready for our own battle. But today, may I call upon you all that at this great day, Let us all remember that nothing in the world can be done unless it has the purported support of God. We have done the battle, and we again rededicate ourselves not only in the struggle to emancipate other territories in Africa. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. Let us now, fellow Ghanaians, let us now ask for God's blessing. And for only 2 seconds, in your thousands and millions, I want to ask you to pause only for 1 minute and give thanks to Almighty God for having led us through obstacles, difficulties, imprisonment, hardship and suffering to have brought us to the end of our struggle today.
Into the land of freedom, He's the Redeemer and the champion of liberty, of human equality. Let's salute Him, fellow Ghanaians, the nation's founder, Sergeant Kwame Nkrumah. May God bless him, Ghana showboy, Africa's great son, Sergeant Dr. Nkrumah.
Radio Gold, 90.5 FM, live and alive. No, it's
It's 3 minutes more to the top of the hour 9. You are welcome to today's edition of Alhaji and Alhaji, the mother of all talk shows. 3rd of February of the month of February, the year 2018. You're welcome to the show. My name is Sami Eshen. And this morning, there's lots on our table to interrogate because this week has been a very busy week with so many issues popping up. This week, we have had the minority in Parliament issuing a statement, their own report of the 5-member committee which investigated the matter of the cash for seat. After the investigation of that matter and the report finally coming out, the minority decided to issue the minority report on the matter, which indicted the Trades Ministry, the Millennium Excellence Foundation, and those involved in the whole saga. Equally, was there an issue where the minority raised issues concerning the $2.25 billion bond, which the finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, issued somewhere in last year, for which the minority felt there was something fishy and therefore decided to take the matter up. Basing their facts on the report of Shuach, the minority called on the finance minister to either resign or His Excellency the President fire scene. This matter was thoroughly debated in the media, with the minority standing their ground that the finance minister must resign. Later, we got information the finance minister was taking the matter to court to clear himself. Also dominant in the conversation was what we got to hear at the tail end of the week when His Excellency the President called on the Upper West Regional Minister to step aside for investigations to be conducted into the attack of the regional NADMO officer and allied issues as well. These and many more issues popped up. I also recollect the matter of the First Deputy Speaker of Parliament, the Honorable Joseph Osei-Usu. His statement that the Galamseyers who have been mining illegally must be shot. That matter also took center stage in the discourse in the media. These and many more came up in the course of the week. For media men, yourself, myself, all of us to brood upon. But which are we tabling for discussion today on Alhaji and Alhaji, the mother of all talk shows? We'll have a critical analysis of the minority in Parliament calls for the finance minister to resign, whilst he has to sue Shuach and related matters. Also, would we have a thorough discussion on the suspension of the Upper West Regional Minister as investigations are being conducted into the matter of the attack of the regional NADMO office. We would analyze the statement by the first Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Joseph Osei-Owusu, to shoot galamseyers as an alternative to ending illegal mining in Ghana. As always, I'm helped in the studio by fine gentlemen and ladies who do justice to the issue. Mr. Kwesipra Jr. is the managing editor of the Insight newspaper. Comrade Murtala Ibrahim Mohammed is former MP for Nanton and the Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry. Dr. David Percy, student of history and politics, and the Honorable Isaac Adongo, Member of Parliament for Bolga Central. They will help me to discuss these issues. As always, I take the time to take you through the headlines of the papers we have this morning, so we abreast ourselves before we set the tone for the conversation today. And on the front page of the Daily Graphic newspaper, you find the story, 3 police officers caged over escape of 2 convicted robbers. Speaker witnesses installation of chiefs at Pakro. Court sentences 3 robbers to 90 years and stamp out more practices at the ports. That's according to the AGI. You'll find on the front page of the Ghanaian Times newspaper the banner story, 3 cops in hot water for conspiring to free 2 convicted armed robbers. I'm grateful to all Ghanaians. That's according to His Excellency the Vice President. PFJ creates 745,000 jobs. That's according to the Agric Minister. And 14 family members perish in accident. All on the front page of the paper. Also, UN calls on Kenya to end ongoing TV station suspension. Captured by the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Daily Guide has a picture of the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Baumia, with the National Chief Imam Sheikh Nuhu Shaributu at the Abusukai Central Mosque yesterday. And it says, Baumia thanks all. EC boss begs for more time. Family of 14 perish in crash. Cash for seat committee splits. And 3 cops arrested. That's all on the front page of the Daily Guide newspaper. Finally, the Spectator newspaper has got a picture of a beautiful lady, and it says, Akuya Amankwa to host season 2 of Purple Room on Angel TV. 700,000 Ghanaians suffer from glaucoma, and lifting heavy weights can result in hernia. That's according to a physician, or on the front page of the Spectator newspaper. So those are the headlines of the newspapers. As always, we always encourage you to send us your thoughts, your views, and your comments. They play a very important role in our discussion, and you can do so by going to Facebook and Twitter and sending me a message. And the handle you'd have to use is Samuel Ishen GH. Samuel Ishen GH. That's how you find me on Facebook and then on Twitter, and you can start sending your comments through. I would read these comments when they come through. Also, we are monitored live across the world on our website, www.radiogold905.com, and you can monitor us as well on the TuneIn application. Search for Radio Gold 90.5. You can make it easy on yourself. If you go to the Google Play Store and install our application, search for Radio Gold 90.5 on the Google Play Store, install that application, and you can monitor us. That's by way of welcoming you to today's edition of the show. So we'll kickstart the conversation by looking at the minority in Parliament's call for the Finance Minister to resign whilst he heads to sue Shuach and matters arising. I'll start the conversation with the Honorable Isaac Adongo on this matter of the Shuach report and their call for the Honorable Minister for Finance to resign. Honorable, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning to your listeners. I'd like to say hello to my senior comrade, Kwesipra. It's been a while. Good to see you. And Comrade Murtala. He says he doesn't want to be called honorable. And to your good self and Radio Gold for a very good job all over the period. This issue has been a very serious issue that has dragged on for quite some time. we all know that very early in the life of the MPP government, precisely somewhere in March 2017, we woke up to some disturbing news that all of a sudden some $2.25 billion had been issued overnight, and there wasn't much information as to how that transaction took place. Initially, there was a publicity stunt that was intending to say that it was a sign of the confidence in the management of the economy, and but a careful study suggested that no, this was just confidence by one investor who had Nicodemously entered this country and won such a huge bid without any serious competition whatsoever. And so a number of steps were taken to try and get to the bottom of this matter. I recall that we had to call the Minister of Finance to Parliament with the hope that he will be forthcoming with the truth. Unfortunately, the Minister of Finance, when he came before us, looked us in the face and basically lied to us. And we didn't end there. A private individual, one Bronya Jemfi, took the decision to petition Shraj. And the issues were quite simple: to get Shraj to unravel the mystery behind this transaction, but also to find out whether there was any conflict of interest that would have arisen out of this transaction. We know that through the period, they have been back and forth. Unfortunately, somewhere in December, before we rose for Christmas, Shraj released its report. The reports were released 2 weeks even before we rose, and yet nobody knew that the report had been released. But it took the President of the Republic, whilst we were struggling to find chicken to celebrate Christmas, he was on air saying that the Minister of Finance had been cleared of any wrongdoing as a result of the investigations of Shraj. I, in particular, at that time, told the press that I wasn't interested in discussing that matter at that time because that was not the right period to discuss it. People were out there celebrating Christmas, and there wasn't much that we could do with that discussion, and that we will bring the conversation back at the appropriate time. And rightly so, last week, the minority had cause to revisit that conversation and to let the people of Ghana know what actually happened. Suddenly, we were told that the finance minister, who had been told by the president that he has been cleared, is now seeking to go to court to clear his name. I don't know whether he wants to clear it the second time, because the president had indicated quite emphatically that the man had been cleared. Probably he would have to go to the president to show him the particular page and paragraph that he read that got the man cleared, so that he doesn't go to court because the president says he's been cleared. But what are the issues? The issues are quite simple. In the financial governance of this country, a lot of work has been done over the years to try and ensure that when we have to look for money, we have to borrow money to fund the projects and programs of government, it is done with the ultimate objective of achieving value for money, of making sure that the processes are transparent and competitive enough to allow the market forces to determine appropriate interest rate for the people, but also to ensure that the capital markets of Ghana, just like any other capital market, does not become one that is subject to manipulation by anybody. So Shraj set out to do its work, and Shraj's findings are quite worrying. They are quite worrying because, one, Shraj says that the Public Financial Management Act was breached. And if you recall, when the Minister of Finance assumed office and when he met the IMF, one of his assurances he gave to IMF was that the Public Financial Management Act was going to be his Bible. And it was through the Public Financial Management Act that he was going to ensure that there was sanity in the financial management of this country. 2 months down the line, the minister breached that particular Bible. that he assured the IMF in the issuance of this particular bond. In fact, Siraj is emphatic that Section 56(1) of the Public Financial Management Act was not followed, and reads that in conjunction with Article 181, which requires quite clearly that financial transactions, particularly those of borrowing nature, the terms and conditions should be brought before Parliament for approval. That was not done in the case of this transaction. Two, Siraj was of the view that the very guidelines and policies and programs that the Bank of Ghana itself has instituted over the years to ensure that bonds are issued in compliance with competitive processes were completely sidestepped in the case of the issuance of this very bond. In other words, Bank of Ghana just went out and issued the bond without regard to its own guidelines. 3, the Siraj report was a difficulty in establishing conflict of interest, even though it was very clear that the nature and character and the relationship of Ken Ofori-Atta to the financial markets pose potential conflict of interest situation. But in coming to this conclusion, Siraj demonstrates a lack of capacity in many areas to have properly dealt with the issue of conflict of interest, and I would explain at some point what I mean by this. First, let's take the issue of the guidelines of the Bank of Ghana. The Bank of Ghana guidelines are quite clear. When you want to issue a bond, and that bond is going to be issued by auction, you are supposed to advertise that bond or that instrument for not less than 1 week before the activity takes place. Not less than 1 week. You must give at least 1 week notice or advertisement of the particular bond, indicating the nature of the instrument, the amount involved, the maturity profile, and all of that. You must do that in 1 week. The reason is to encourage investors across the globe to have ample time to do enough research and gather enough background information to make an investment decision on that bond. So that is very critical. The second most important regulation is that where the bond is a new bond, when it is a new bond, the features are such that it is not the type of bonds that you have issued before. You are not reopening an existing bond, but you are issuing a completely new bond. You are required to give 2 weeks notice whether you are going to issue the bond by auction or by book building, which are the two processes that you use. You must give 2 weeks notice. So these are the clear rules of transparency and providing the market with enough information. Because investors that come to buy this, but especially when it is also open to non-resident investors, you are trying to tap into a pool of funds across the globe. So you have somebody who is managing funds in Australia, who is looking for a sovereign country like Ghana to invest in. Within 2 weeks, he is able to make contact with primary dealers in Ghana. He is able to find out what is Ghana. He is able to find out whether Ghana has the potential and the capacity to pay. And as a result, he is able to profile the risk associated with this bond in order to price appropriately for this bond. So you give the people 2 weeks. There are those in Hong Kong, in other countries that are interested in moving funds across the globe. They need 2 weeks to make that decision. In the case of the 2.25 billion bond, the 5-year and the 10-year bonds were issued through auction. And what is the rule? 1 week notice. Auction must be done through a 1 week notice. Suddenly, the career professionals at the Bank of Ghana, who have been doing this job for decades professionally and ethically suddenly forget how to do this, and then send out instructions to issue this bond at 12:31 on one Thursday afternoon, and tells investors that by 2 p.m. you would have submitted your bids by 2 p.m. In fact, they gave 1.5 hours notice between announcement and closure of the bond. So if you are a primary dealer who received this email in your inbox, and you were unfortunately in a meeting, and you spent 1.5 hours in that meeting, you would have returned to open the email only to realize that the bond issuance is over. Not to talk about the investor in Australia who would have now wished to find out who are the reputable primary dealers in Ghana that I can work with. What information can I get on this bond? By the time he plays the call, the bond issuance is over. But instructively, 21 companies affiliated to Franklin Templeton, they met the 1.5 hours deadline. The report tells us that the 25 companies that they claimed include Franklin Templeton and 20 other subsidiaries of Franklin Templeton. They were aware within the 1.5 hours and actually met the 1.5 hours, and in the case of the 5 to 10 year bonds, took almost everything away. This is what the report is telling us. If you recall, in the heat of this debate, when the minister brought what he called the books that had been built, the order books, I was on Joy FM news file when I indicated that the value books amounted, the order books amounted to 4.9. Where is the 4.8? You recall that 4.8 is what they issued in 1.5 hours, as per the Shard report. Now we now know how that was issued. It was done in 1.5 hours. Worse still, before the Ministry of Finance would tell Bank of Ghana to go ahead and issue those bonds, the primary dealers, in fact the book runners, were already informing some selected investors about the bond that even the Bank of Ghana didn't know about. One of them, Barclays Bank, is also the primary dealer of Franklin Templeton. So Barclays Bank was busy sharing information with Franklin Templeton and 20 other investors for them to meet the 1.5 hours. So even before Bank of Ghana was aware that they are supposed to go on the market and issue 5-year and 10-year bonds, Franklin Templeton through Barclays Bank and other book runners were already aware. Can you imagine this type of a market? This is what we call insider trading. Very criminal. So that is one. In the case of the 7-year and 15-year bonds, they were new bonds. And the Bank of Ghana rules is that this should be done by 2 weeks notice. They gave 1 day notice. 1 day, and when they opened the bid, it took 4 hours to close. But again, Franklin Templeton and 20 of its subsidiaries were aware and compliant with this short notice. Clearly, this is very, very worrying. But another dimension to this that is very worrying, and which I am surprised the Minister of Finance still has the face to shamelessly still be defending, is the fact that the issuance calendar, which is the source of advertisement and marketing of government securities, was issued with the Minister of Finance apparently not aware that he needed to issue 9.7 billion of bonds. So The Minister of Finance is aware of all the debt of Ghana, their maturity profile. In fact, if you read the Ghana debt statistics published at the Minister of Ghana's own website, which incidentally only terminates in June, with a debt figure of 1387, that has been the debt figure ever since June to December. In the face of all that is happening, that's a different subject we'll be discussing. That particular debt statistics report even tells you the percentage of debts that are due to mature in 2017. So you already know all your debts that will mature in 2017. Nothing is a surprise. So you want to reprofile debts. You are aware that 28% of Ghana's public debt will be maturing in 2017, which amount to something around 34 billion. And yet, when you are programming how much you are going to borrow to reprofile this debt, you don't know the figures. So you issue the calendar, and somewhere along the line you come and do a tap. You come and sole source loans under emergency arrangements, as though you didn't know that you need that money. That is, in fact, there's no adjective to describe that kind of incompetence if it is not for rent seeking. And I am worried that even after the petition on this 2.25 billion, the minister has consistently pursued this reckless path up to December. And I'll give you some numbers. In September, in the third week of September, the minister went on the market and used one day to issue 2.87 billion, 3 billion on a tap. It wasn't in his issuance calendar. He didn't even know he would need that money. In October, the minister sends a letter to Bank of Ghana to issue the issuance calendar, which is the cash requirement for government for the third quarter. The fourth quarter, October, November, December. He issues it on the 7th. On that 7th, the calendar is issued. On the 3rd, 3 days later, the minister arrives to say that he wants to sole source 2.8 billion that is not on the calendar. Even 3 days, he is not aware that he will need money. So he goes to sole source 2.87 billion. In November, this same minister arrives again. Outside of the issuance calendar, he needs 5.5 billion tap sole source of loans. What kind of minister is this? Let me ask you this question. Radio Gold, you ask your finance manager to give you a schedule of your obligations for a quarter, and for him to tell you whether given the nature of your cash flows, the monies that are coming to you and the monies that you need to spend out, including the loans you owe, how much do you need to borrow for that quarter in order to stay financially solvent? Your finance minister, your finance manager brings you this report. Your board of directors called into a meeting, and they review it and they approve it, and ask the finance minister, go and source for this money. 3 days later, when the managing director comes to office, the finance manager opens the door and starts scratching his head. Manager, this thing that I brought yesterday, I realized that we will need 2.8 billion or more money. But don't worry, I know the person who has the money to give to us. That's so sourcing. So you give him that money in September, 3 billion, you give it to him. In October, he brings you a same report. On the 7th, you approve it. 3 days later, this manager walks into your office again, scratching his head and saying that the figures that I gave you, I think I didn't get it right. So can you approve for me to go and raise another 2.87 billion? 3 days later, and again, he knows the person who can give you the money at an interest rate. Then you look at this finance manager, you're already losing patience. November, he now appears again. Manager, you figures now me the buy. Let me say, can I send me the 5.5 big HMO baby? Can you give me the chance to raise it? But don't worry, I know somebody who has the money to give to us. And you approve that one too. If you are the manager of Radio Gold, there are only two questions you ask. One, how come he always knows who will give us the money? How come? How come we have to go to the market with adequate time and notice to look for the cheapest source of this money? But he always comes scratching his head and creating an emergency for the money to be raised in one day. And he knows the person who will give it to us at a certain interest rate. So if this man is not colluding with the man who is taking the money from to make profit, then his level of incompetence, you can't describe it. Whichever way you look at it, this finance minister is not competent to hold that office. Can't you see that he cannot even see beyond his nose when it comes to his financial planning? This finance minister, when he gives you an issuance calendar, you better shred it, because it doesn't mean anything. He will come the next day scratching his head to say that he needs to borrow money on an emergency basis. Cumulatively, including what he did in June, which he calls liquidity management or liability management, 21.5 billion emergency sole source of loans have occurred under Ken Ofori-Atta. That is a dangerous character. That is the most riskiest person to our financial future. In fact, that kind of person should be far away from our finances. So you don't even need the president to sack you. You need to tell yourself that you are incompetent. You don't know the work. And Ken is still sitting there. And of course, they now tell us that it is his miracles that have dazed us. Of course. Why are we not going to be dazed when the financial management of this country now must be managed on a crisis basis every day? That we no longer have the right to have adequate time to source for cheaper sources of funding. And as a result, the 19.7 or so percent that they raised in March has become the benchmark interest rate up to date, even though they claim inflation is on a downward trajectory. So what is the impact of the improved financial economic fundamentals they are talking about? So that is one major issue to do with the issuance calendar and to do with financial planning under this government and under Ken Ofori-Atta. In fact, it is a lot easier for this government to raise billions than to dig a borehole. A lot more easier for them to raise dubious funds than to go about the business of digging wells for us to get even dirty water to drink. That is this government. But in any case, where are all the monies going that after June, when our debt was 138, it has remained 138 up to December? And the Ministry of Finance can't even produce updated Ghana debt statistics beyond June. Can't you see how risky we have left our finances in the hand of somebody? But that is one. I want to move to the issue of conflict of interest. How do you establish conflict of interest when you don't even know the financial control and the financial investment interests of Ken Ofori-Atta across the globe? Franklin Templeton and 20 of his other subsidiaries that came to buy the bonds, they don't use their own monies to buy the bonds. They are fund management companies. They take money from investors to come here and invest. So the fact that Data Bank, Enterprise Group, and the rest, even though they were notified of the bond issuance, they didn't participate in the bond, doesn't mean that they couldn't have bought the bonds. Did you hear that? The fact that they did not participate in buying the bonds doesn't mean they couldn't have bought the bonds. Do you know where Frank Interpreter and the 20 subsidiaries got the money to come and buy the bonds? So, Shraj, don't go and look at the list who and who bought the bonds for each primary dealer. You should be interested in funds movement among these companies. Did any of these companies affiliated to Ken Ofori-Atta move funds anywhere for it to come back to Ghana to buy the bonds? That is a major question to be answered. It hasn't been answered. In fact, we are told that Ken Ofori-Atta is a strong believer of tax safe havens. We are told by the leakage of the Paradise newspapers that Ken Ofori-Atta has a company in Cayman Islands. These are companies operating in the underworld. So, did Shraj find out how many companies in tax havens are owned by Ken Ofori-Atta? And does Shraj have any way of knowing whether those companies moved funds to Franklin Templeton and his other 20 subsidiaries that came to buy the bonds? If you can't answer that, you can't pronounce on conflict of interest. In fact, even the companies we know Ken to own in Ghana, he excluded them from his asset declaration. Now you think he will include companies that he holds at underworld. So for those who claim that there is no conflict of interest, what Shraj said is that there is potential conflict of interest, but they didn't get the proof. But how can they get the proof when they don't know the total investment interest of Ken Ofori-Atta across the globe? So until you establish that, it's a lingering question that must be addressed. And that is a very, very worrying sign. Now, I want to let us take our minds a little back and look at how, as a country, we have struggled to get a handle on our public debt since Ken became the finance minister. After Ken made sure that the whole financial regulatory regime of this country is now tainted and covered by Data Bank and Associates. You recall that in our statement we made reference to the 40% acquisition of Enterprise Group by Black Star Holdings, which we indicated is founded or owned by Charles Edubwai. Very basic questions arise. When Siam bought the 40%, it was valued at $21 million. 6-7 years down the line, a deputy finance minister, after a couple of months of this dubious deal, his company comes to buy the shares 7 times the value at $130 million. Very basic questions. Who cleared that transaction? Enterprise Group is a listed company on the Ghana Stock Exchange. Who cleared it? The Securities and Exchange Commission cleared that transaction. We didn't have the governing board of the Securities and Exchange Commission at the time. Today, we now have the governing board with the Director General himself, the Vice President of Data Bank that owns Enterprise Group. A member of the board is Charles Edubwai himself, whose company acquired the 40%. So if I now filed a petition for insider trading and for improper conduct outside of the stock exchange against that transaction, I will be in the same person's court adjudicating his own case. The vice president, as vice president of Data Bank, which has a stake in Enterprise, would have followed that transaction killing outside when he wasn't the Director General. Today he sits there and I'm supposed to go to him to pronounce judgment on his own conduct. The Deputy Minister of Finance in question sits on the board. Today I go there asking him to respond to his own conduct. Clearly, the stranglehold of Ken Ofori-Atta and the Data Bank Group on financial regulation is toxic to the health of the capital markets of Ghana. And it doesn't need a soothsayer to tell you that the greatest, riskiest person to move away from our financial system is Ken Ofori-Atta. And the earlier that is done, the better for the financial health of our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Isaac Adongo, for your submission this morning. If you just joined us today, it's 3rd of February 2018. Alhaji and Alhaji, the mother of all talk shows. My first guest done with his submission. Moving on to Comrade Murtala Ibrahim Mohammed. Comrade, good morning.
Good morning, Sean, and good morning to my brother and our own senior Comrade Kwesi Pratt. I thought that you would have asked me to start. I haven't asked my brother to start. I'm wondering what I'm going to say on it, because to a very large extent, if not absolutely, he has indeed touched on the nitty-gritties of this fraud that is perpetrated on the people of this country. So I won't attempt getting into the financial matters or economic issues of it, which he has dealt with, lest I risk making the program a bit monotonous. What I'm going to do is to look at some of the other very important issues that were completely ignored. We need to understand that this is not the first time we have gone in for bonds. This country, as far as I'm concerned, and in the Fourth Republican Constitution, or under the Fourth Republican Constitution, which we have operated since 1993, we have had successive governments that have gone in for bonds. So there is nothing wrong with any government going in for bond. You go in to ensure that some challenges that the economy faces, you are able to do that. Now, we need to understand the history of the NPP and the bonds that they have gone in successfully. You remember President Kufuor went in for a bond somewhere in 2007. They went in for the bond to solve some of the teething economic challenges that we were facing at that time. Sadly, they spent over 60% of that bond they went in for to pay salaries of workers. As a matter of fact, we were told that they were going in for that bond to reservice, if you like, our debts, so that the burden on us as a state and the servicing of the debt, which culminated to a lot of expenditure for this country, and for which reason we couldn't meet some of our expenditures as a country, was solved. Unfortunately, when they went in, they spent that for salaries of. If the current government had gone in for a bond such as this, they would have indeed taken cue from what the previous NPP administration did. But it is also important for us to look at the bonds that the NDC went in for. What has been the cost we incurred as a state in executing those bonds, and juxtapose that with the cost incurred in executing this particular fraudulent and dubious bond. And you remember when the thing happened, my position was that it was a fraud perpetrated on the people of this country, that it was a dubious. There were many people, particularly within the MPP, who felt that these were strong words that were using. I think that with the Shiraji's report, it has been proven beyond any doubt that this was indeed a dubious bond. My brother, what shocked me, and what I simply can't comprehend, is the alacrity, the confidence that Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta has, the extent to which he thinks that he must go to court to clear his name. Because when you quietly analyze the confidence with which he says that he's going to court, juxtaposing that with the report that has been given by Shiraj, you wonder whether indeed he thinks that there is some confidence or some, if you like, strategy he may want to use in the Supreme Court. Because this one, you don't need even an economist or financial expert to tell you that a fraud was perpetrated on the people of this country. Now, what has been the cost of the bond, the previous bond that successive governments have gone in for? Now, you have a bond that we went in for, and the legal advisor of the government, the Minister for Justice and Attorney General, herself, even after the bond was issued, made a public chilling pronouncement that she was unaware of that bond. For me, that is extremely worrying, that you have a member of the government, and in fact, a cabinet minister, And such bonds at least would have been discussed as cabinet, because you are committing this nation into a financial burden, a debt of about 2.25 billion. Now, if you want to look at it in terms of cities, it will take us several decades, if not centuries, to be able to pay this money. Yet you have your legal advisor, because such bonds border on not just financial issues, they also border on legal issues, because it's like a contract, an arrangement, a financial arrangement you are entering with entities. And those entities, to a very large extent, are foreign entities. You are getting into such, and your legal advisor makes public pronouncement that I am not aware of this. For me, that was the beginning of the mess that we are experiencing today. As we see today, the MPP and this government is not talking about that chilling revelation that the Minister of Justice and Attorney General made. I believe that if they had a way to withdraw those words, they would have done that. And that was the beginning. 2, you have a bond of that nature in which a so-called legal fee, about 700,000 Ghana cedis, paid to friends of this government, the very people who were occupying the Flagstaff House. As a matter of fact, they were not occupying Flagstaff House. They were occupying their pockets. Now, the argument is that they went into a transaction with government. It is not their business to determine whether indeed government pays them 700,000 or 1 million. They come in, they enter into a financial arrangement with government, who provide legal services. This is how much we are charging. This is how much government is paying. So legally, they haven't done anything wrong. But I want to ask them, is it questionable? Those same people, on the issue of the bus branding, when the argument was made that this was a duly signed contract, this was a contract that people entered into, strictly speaking, legally speaking, they say yes, but it's unquestionable that you cannot brand buses at this cost. And for which reason the government at that time took particular interest and took steps to ensure that their unquestionability of the decision taken by the then Minister for Transport was corrected. I am asking those moralists who moralized the financial debate at that time, that where have all these moral debates gone to? Because if you made public pronouncement and wrote on your walls all kinds of things and said it was unquestionable, now how unquestionable could you be that you go in to help a state in a bond, and then you have nothing, you see nothing wrong, taking $700,000. So legally they didn't do anything wrong, but it was unquestionable. And I think that the basis on which they raised this moral question on the issue of the bus branding and other transactions are the very basis on which you also raise this moral question. Now, the other question you ask yourself is it that the Minister of Finance didn't have the legal capacity to represent government of Ghana in this transaction? Is it a case that the Minister of Justice and Attorney General couldn't have provided those legal services to ensure that we had this? Was it necessary that we needed to get a private legal firm and doled out this unreasonable, outrageous $700,000 to perform a transaction that can easily be performed by even lawyers at the Ministry of Finance, or at least lawyers at the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General? And I think that that is the point that people must understand, that all these issues were meant ostensibly by this government as a means of defrauding the people of this country. Don't be surprised why the president will not sack the minister. The president wouldn't sack him because that is his cousin. And the president put the minister there for a purpose. This same minister told the president, informed the president, that they had expunged thousands of ghost names from the controller and accountant. You remember? And no opportunity will the president get without praising him. The president came out and ridiculed himself that they had expunged thousands of names, and even gave a figure how much they were saving the state as a result of the outstanding work done by the minister, only for the minister to come back and apologize that that was a complete falsehood. And the apology came when teachers who were largely affected by this came out and said, no, we are not ghosts, we are actually existing, we are actually teaching, we are actually at post. And then that apology came. So I'm saying that the president will not sack this minister. And interestingly, section of the media in this country do not think that these are matters that we should concentrate ourselves on. Now, people have reduced everything to an NDC NPP issue, and that even if you leave, you are an NDC or you sympathize with NDC, and you raise a genuine and legitimate, question about this fraudulent conduct, they would disregard even the sincerity of your debate, and they will reduce it to an NDC NPP. Just some few years, less than 2 years ago, those same media men indeed pretended to be the protectors of the governance system of this country, pretended to be those who fight for transparency and protecting the public purse. Yet, what we are experiencing today, not even a quarter of such happened, and the roofs were everywhere. The roofs were actually splitting because people felt that people were engaged in acts that they were not convinced with. You don't need anybody to tell you that this Minister of Finance, indeed, and whoever is involved, perpetrated fraud on us. Look, I'll tell you one interesting thing. It is not for nothing that His Excellency the President has appointed his relative to key positions. Because if you have your relative as Minister of Finance, you have your relative as Minister of Roads, you have your relative as Minister of Local, Water Resources, Works and Housing, and you have your relatives as Minister of Justice and Attorney General. Now, clearly, you can have such transactions without many people knowing. Now, why is it that people are not even asking whether this particular transaction went to cabinet? Because if this issue was actually discussed at cabinet, and if the decision was taken at cabinet, I believe that the Minister of Finance, Minister of Justice and Attorney General wouldn't have said that she was unaware. In fact, remember at that time, cabinet hadn't been constituted. Cabinet hadn't been constituted. So on what basis did the president or the government take the decision? How exigent was it that they simply couldn't have waited until they constitute cabinet so that proper things can be done? What was the rationale behind the rush? Why did the government want to do this without taking into consideration the views? Now, is it not also very clear, as my brother indicated and captured in the Shraj report, that some of these financial regulations were blatantly disregarded? Is it not the case? Now, what is the consequences of those who deliberately do that? I really don't think that it's an issue of just incompetence. I think that it's an issue of criminal mindedness. Because clearly, the Minister of Finance, even if he didn't know, I believe those who would have advised him at the ministry and those brains within the government would have told him that what you are doing would be a clear violation of regulations governing the conduct of such transactions. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they wanted to perpetrate on the people of this country. So it is not just an issue of incompetence. It is an issue of criminal mindedness. And that was precisely what the Minister of Finance demonstrated. Imagine this thing happening under NDC. Imagine this thing happening under President Mahama. You would have heard the kinds of things people would have said. You would have heard, in fact, there would have been a lot of, if you like, citizen vigilantes springing out left, right, and center to point out that this government perpetrated in this. And for me, that is the most worrying aspects of it. Now, have we even taken into consideration how we are going to service this particular debt? Now, the other questions that I would expect, and I believe that you and many other people raise this issue. So far, the monies we have taken, how have we expanded the money? Now, you have the same minister who was invited by Parliament to come and tell the people of this country how the transaction was done. He came to Parliament extremely condescending, insulted everybody at Parliament, and section of the media says, let's clap for him. Now, you would listen to a bizarre statement that I made, that yes, the minister was invited, he provided answers. In fact, section 14, the standing order 49, which was invoked by Parliament, gave specific, in fact, it's specific. They are inviting you to come and answer specific questions. And that explains why even there is not supposed to be debate. Because specific questions will put to you, when you come to Parliament, you come with specific answers. You had the Minister of Finance who came to Parliament. He never came with any answer. He didn't provide any answer. He came and insulted everybody in Parliament and left. Now, you don't expect the over 27 million Ghanaians to call you. Where are they going to call you to and ask you to respond to questions that border on their survival? You don't expect that. But their representation, which by extension is the representation of the entire state, the entire over 27 million, invited you to come and provide answers, and those answers were never provided. And I think for me that is extremely worrying. So aside the clear infractions, aside the clear sidestepping, disregarding the rules and regulations governing the issuance of such bonds, which has been enumerated time and again, I want to look at the rationale behind the complete quietness of civil society group, at least section of the civil society group. Now, we live in a country at the moment that we are rationing water. We are rationing water in this country. We live in a country at the moment where things are extremely bad. Prices of fuel and other things are escalating day by day. We live in a country where government himself is not meeting his revenue targets. We live in a country where statutory payments are not being cleared. Yet the president is peddling falsehood that they clear all statutory payments. Yet we would expand this amount of money simply because we want our friends to enjoy the booty so that we can be the beneficiaries now and even when we leave government. And for me, that is extremely worrying. So my point on this is, let's begin demanding, and it should be interesting to the people of this country, where the Minister of Finance, where he is getting the confidence that if he goes to the Supreme Court, he will be cleared. And if you read the pro-government newspapers, they make conclusive statement that the minister is going to the Supreme Court to have his name cleared. Now, you know the consequences of it. Now, assuming that the minister goes to the Supreme Court and succeed in having his names cleared, he is not clearing his name just for today's debate. He is clearing his name for tomorrow's debate, because he is well aware that he engaged in fraud. He is very well aware. This government is aware that they have engaged in fraud. So let's have the confidence, and they know where they are getting that confidence from. Once we have these things cleared by the Supreme Court, it will bring to finality to any issue that anybody would want to raise at any point in time. And for me, that is extremely worrying. Now, if you look at the other issue, which is part of the question, has to do with the cash for SIT, as the minority indicated in the press conference. Once again, it's a clearest demonstration. And I listened to government opponent who says, look, they have their say and then we have our way. A minority MP, I was on the president, government has their way, the minority have their say, and then we have our way. It is not an issue of whether we believe that something wrong was perpetrated on the people of this country. It is an issue of us protecting our own. And that whatever is brought to Parliament, we will protect our own. And for me, that is the rationale. That is the psyche of the people who have been given the opportunity to govern this country. And I think that the clergy also ought to be speaking. They may not make any impact on this government, but at least they would have demonstrated fairness and independence when it comes to politicians engaging in such outright and blatant robbery of state resources. Because you cannot find any example of such robbery than we are experiencing and witnessing today.
All right. Thank you very much, Comrade Murtala Ibrahim Mohammed, for your submission. That brings us to some 7 more minutes to the top of the hour 10. If you just join us, this is Alhaji and Alhaji, the mother of all talk shows. Your thoughts, your views, very much welcome. So far, lots and lots of text messages have come through on Twitter and then Facebook. I'd like to read yours as well. Look for the handle at Samuel Ishen GH. When it comes through, I'll take the time to go through all these text messages. Mr. Pratt.
Well, the matters before us are very, very simple. Indeed, when they are discussed in very technical terms, it becomes exceedingly difficult for some people to follow. And I'll try and do my best and reduce it to the barest minimum so that all of us can follow what this discussion is about. In the campaign for the 2016 elections, the New Patriotic Party made the point that the national debt stock had become a burden for the national economy. They spoke about the ratio, some ratio between the gross domestic product and the level of indebtedness and so on. and actually made the point that we are approaching the HIPIC status. They said that if they came into government, they would ensure that the debt level declined. Now, since January 7th, 2017, the New Patriotic Party and its government has said that they have adopted a smart way of managing the nation's indebtedness. And that very smart way of managing the nation's indebtedness is to borrow, take cheap loans to replace expensive loans, and thereby bring down the level of indebtedness. This has been the argument. Now, clearly, it's obvious that they are also taking loans. This administration is also taking loans. The rationale they provide for taking loans is that these loans are cheaper and that they will bring down the debt stock. However, the latest figures I've seen indicate that the debt stock is rising. So how come that we replace expensive loans with cheap loans, and the debt stock is rising? There's a question that all of us would have to answer. But part of the strategy for raising funds, for borrowing and so on, is to issue bonds. And they've issued a number of bonds, which Honorable Isaac Adongo has already described, and I don't want to get into that. But they've issued a number of bonds. Now, the position of the minority is that the issuance of these bonds did not follow, did not comply with the laws of the country. They did not follow approved procedure, and so on. This is the position of the minority, that the issuance of the bonds were irregular. They were illegal. They didn't follow approved procedure. Basic. Now, this issue then went to the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice for determination as to whether or not indeed the issuance of the bonds followed legal processes and so on. Of course, at the center of that was the request for a declaration that conflict of interest could be detected in the transactions and so on. Shraj did his work and published a report. And indeed, the first time I read the Shraj report, I said that we are in trouble. Because when I read the Shraj report, there were aspects of the Shraj report which confirmed that we had not followed procedure, and that indeed some of the procedures had been truncated, they had been breached, or whatever. Now, interestingly, Shraj made a statement which was most interesting and difficult to understand. Shraj said that there had been no conflict of interest, that he didn't have evidence to support the claim that the Minister of Finance was in a conflict, had been the beneficiary of a conflict of interest situation. At the same time, Shraj went on and said that it could detect potential conflict of interest. I'm confused. I'm totally confused. What is a conflict of interest situation? And what is potential conflict of interest? I'm completely lost. And perhaps it may become necessary for us to get better clarity on the use of these technologies. My understanding of a conflict of interest is simply when an official or anybody with power is making decisions or implementing decisions in such a manner as to benefit himself. That's my understanding. So, for example, persons who are known to be your business partners and so on, a conflict of interest arises. If you're a minister and you award contracts to your wife, you could then be getting close or getting into a conflict of interest situation. If you award contracts to your siblings, you could have a similar situation. Indeed, even if the contract is awarded to your political party cronies or members, and so on, you could be getting very close to a conflict of interest situation. So that's my understanding. Now, the Schwartz report is exceedingly interesting. Because the same Schwartz report did claim that they are taking a look at the assets declaration of the Minister of Finance and come to the conclusion that at least one of his companies had not been declared on his assets declaration form. That raises many issues. One, to what extent can the assets declaration form of the minister be trusted? Could it be possible that there are other dealings of the minister or properties of the minister which are not listed on his asset declaration form and so on? All of these issues come up. Now, this week, we have all heard that the minister has announced his intention to drag the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice to court for the purpose of expunging aspects of the report that he finds as baseless, that he finds as not supported by the evidence, and so on. Now, I think it will be interesting for us to see how the courts will determine this matter. Now, it is perfectly within the right of the minister to go to any court. Perfectly within the right of the minister to go to any court to seek clarification, declarations, and so on. And I have no difficulty with the minister going to court. What is interesting, however, is that this same Schwartz report, which is likely to be the focus of court litigation, is the same report that propagandists of the New Patriotic Party claim some very interesting issues. Why would a minister take a report which had exonerated him to court? I mean, this is just incredible. I don't understand it. Somebody must be explaining. So the minister is not happy that the report has exonerated him. You know, is that what we're being told? But I heard over and over again that this report is a very good report. I heard propagandists and communicators of the New Patriotic Party praising Schwartz to the high heavens and insisting that the report was so good and had cleared the minister. Now, a few weeks later, the minister is so angry, saying that Schwartz has not done a good job and that he needs to go to court in order to clear himself. Clear himself from what? You know. So this is something that we need to ponder. We need to ponder. Now, again, I think that it is within the right of the minority also to hold press conferences. Indeed, it is within the right of the minority also to even start an impeachment procedure. Nothing stops the minority from doing that. But from where I sit, I'm beginning to doubt whether indeed the minority can achieve its objective. Is it possible under the current dispensation, given our history, the history of the Fourth Republic and so on, for impeachment, for Parliament to impeach a minister? Is that possible? Because if you watch the conduct of Parliament and the manner in which Parliament has taken decisions and so on, you can see that voting in Parliament has not just been always on partisan lines. It has not taken account of the facts and analysis of the facts. A lot of people have blamed the whip system for the current situation. So if you're a new patriotic party member of parliament, then you go along to defend the party and government, no matter the facts, no matter the analysis. If you are an NDC member of parliament, you go ahead and oppose government in spite of the facts and in spite of the analysis and so on. Now, if this situation is going to persist in the determination of the case which may be made by the minority after 14 days, what outcome are we likely to expect? Now, there are some who have said that it is possible to cure this malady. And to cure the way to cure this malady is to ensure that voting in parliament on such sensitive and important issues are carried out in secret balloting. But we tried secret balloting before, and it produced the same results. You understand? So how can we be sure that if we employ secret balloting this time, it will produce a different result? I think that the people of Ghana ought to be very deeply worried by a situation in which they have a parliament which has become so partisan that the facts don't matter. The analysis of the facts don't matter. You understand? And I think that we need to be very, very seriously worried about this situation. Because in the final analysis, we will never get justice. We will never get the right things done. And as they themselves say in Parliament, the minority can always have their say, but the majority will always have its way. This situation, indeed, is dangerous for any democratic practice anywhere. It undermines confidence in the democratic processes and so on. And perhaps at a later date, we need to be finding antidotes to these kinds of problems. Now, the other thing I like to say is that this debate is not just about processes and legality and so on. This debate is more meaningful than that. And it's more meaningful than that because the processes themselves have a way of determining cost to the state. If you're doing an auction and you keep out a large number of people who have the capacity to participate in the auction and who may be willing to participate in the auction, you drive prices down. You understand? In this case of the issuance of a bond, the interest rate rises. And the interest rate will be paid for by the people of Ghana through their taxes. So if you're talking about processes which provide insufficient time to allow as many as are able and willing to participate in the auction, what you're doing is that you are raising the cost for the Ghanaian taxpayer. And that is what is worrying in this transaction. Of course, if you look at the Shraj report, the Shraj indicates that there was some unnecessary haste in announcing the auction, and that the auction itself was shrouded in some level of secrecy, which enabled only some particular companies and so on to participate in it. That is the worrying part of this whole debate. Now, I do hope that in the final analysis, we will be able to conclude this debate, this argument, and so on, taking into consideration perhaps three key things. One, the interest of the people of Ghana. And the interest of the people of Ghana needs to revolve around the issue of costs. How much are we paying? Can we pay less? And indeed, value for money, and so on. Those must be seen as the interest of the people of Ghana. I think at the end of the day, we should also be able to determine whether processes were properly followed and whether the actions that the finance minister took are legal or not legal, whether indeed our constitutional experiment have suffered defects or not under this dispensation. In the final analysis, I think that whatever the outcome of this issue is, it should help us to shape our journey to deepen democratic practice in our country. These, for me, are the most important ingredients. I'm hoping there are already 2 court cases or 2 threatened court cases. There is Mr. Brujat Jemfi, who initially went to Shraj and who has indicated publicly that he intends to go to court in order to seek clarity on some of the findings of Shraj. So that's one case. Then there's the Minister of Finance who has also publicly indicated through the Minister of Information that he may or will go to court in order to seek clarity. I would wish that these 2 cases are joined, because essentially it's a determination of the same matters and so on. But at the end of the day, we would have some decision from the courts. Now, again, it's important also to mention that even when the courts have determined what the outcomes are, it does not prevent citizens from continuing to discuss the issue if they are not satisfied with the determination by the courts. Now, here we are, 14 days to go. I think now we have about 12 or 11 days more to go. And we are waiting for some drama, at least in Parliament. Some very, very serious drama in Parliament. I do hope that this drama will be meaningful. Finish.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt, for your submission. Let me just... All right, so for those who just joined us, so far we have had Mr. Pratt give us his position on the matter we are discussing, which has to do with a look at the minority in Parliament's call for the finance minister to resign whilst he intends and hints at going to court on the Shraj matter. I'll head on straight to Dr. David Percy for his take on this matter.
Thank you very much. If I may be permitted, you see, at the end of the submission, said that we have 11 or some days to go. 11 days to go. You said that there's some time to go. 11 days or 14 days or something.
I haven't followed the issue. No. The minority has given the finance minister and the president 14 days, so the voting has started.
Oh, okay.
Haven't you followed them?
No, I wanted to know.
Came late.
No. I wanted to know what that was in reference to. So is it an ultimatum? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Host. Very interesting times. We can only be in this situation when you give the hen coop to the care of the fox. And I have to say that I'm very grateful to Honorable Adongo for his very simple explanation of what it is that has gone on. You can see insider trading written all over this. He speaks about incompetence. This is not incompetence. This is crookedness. Our people have something they call accident by design. You're talking of a serial criminal who time after time brings up a financial emergency and acts in ways that can be only beneficial to himself and his cronies. And did you say that this has happened since the 2.25? It's happened on several other occasions.
Did you hear him? Just continue and make your submission.
No. Because I'm just a citizen, a poor
Your role here
pensioner.
is not to conduct an interview. Your role here is to make a presentation.
Yes, and I'm making my presentation on the basis of my understanding of the issues. Right? You're a journalist. In your regular work, you do things in a certain way. I'm just a poor pig farmer. On occasions, I'm invited out to come and speak and offer my opinions on the state of our country. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I can only be grateful to the Honorable for the way he has explained the matters. I want to say that, given all that has been said, you don't need a rocket scientist to tell you that this is insider trading. Now, I'm saying this against a certain background of statements I've already made here on your platform. Now, the thing that strikes me in all of this, and there are a number of things that strike me. One of them is that my friends in the NDC seem to have a particular problem fingering the president. The finance minister is acting on his behalf, at his behest. I don't know whether I heard right, because I've been accused of not hearing right a few occasions already today. But I thought the Honorable Adongo said that the first time anybody got an inkling about the Shraj report was a statement by the president. Okay. It appears that Shraj itself gave everybody something to chew on. He gave the Mr. Broja Jamfi, who sent the petition, something to chew on. He tried to give a loophole for the Minister of Finance to wriggle through. And we can see that in this matter, the entire MPP machinery, the media cabal, everybody else has been whipped into line, either to maintain silence, okay, or to say that, oh, this is no matter. But just doing a very simple calculation this morning, my understanding from all the experts who are speaking on this matter is that by merely excluding competition, Ghana is going to pay 2% more on the interests. Okay. I think we would have gotten a better deal. Okay. But the most conservative estimate is that by just this crookedness, we're going to pay an extra 2% more, which comes out annually as something like 200 million Ghana cedis. That is the equivalent of 5 Woyomes every year. Recall the Woyome matter and the song and dance. In fact, it's gone on for the last 2 electoral cycles and some more. It's still going on. Okay? It hasn't at all ended. On a matter of, I'm not saying that 41 million, whatever it is small money. But I'm saying that on an annual basis, the crookedness of our finance minister, the behest of our president, is going to cost us 200 million cedis extra every year. So this is no small matter. Okay? And to know that it is not just that there was just one-off crime, but that the criminal has returned to the scene and committed the crime severally is a matter of deep concern. And I was making the point that in all of this, I find it hard to understand why our friends in the NDC cannot say that it is the president who has responsibility for this mess. Because the finance minister, his cousin, who acted as his, who has acted throughout all his campaigns as his treasurer, right? Who knows where all the bodies are buried, so to speak, has direct instructions to ensure that all the loans, all the indebtedness that was incurred in the several campaigns to become president are settled as quickly as possible. And that's precisely what he is doing. In fact, I recall one statement by the president. It must be on the occasion of the first Thanksgiving, right? Okay. When he said that he had forgiven everybody who had transgressed against him. I was asking, why would the president say that he's forgiving everybody? But now I understand it in light of all of these things. If you understand that the basic position of the president and his assigns is that this country is theirs. What they're basically doing is trying to recoup as quickly as they can, making up for all those lost years when their inheritance or their property was denied them. And the poor Ghanaian taxpayer who is going to pay for it, and could pay for it big, big time. So if you're saying that beyond the 2.25, a total of others, I think I forget the total tally now. This is something like in the range of 25 billion, thereabouts, yes. So you can just do that calculus. All of them engineered in the same fashion. An emergency situation is created, sole sourcing, you pay higher than you should. And they're laughing all the way to the Cayman Islands and other such places with the loot. And it's happening live. So we are not only burdened with a government of gangsters and thugs. Of course, gangsters and thugs are also crooks. That is what we have. Now, the next question is, what do we do about it? Now, we can imagine all the things that can go on in Parliament. My friend Kwesi complains about too much partisanship. I have no problem with partisanship. Okay? The NPP has a very clear understanding of what a party is. It's a fighting body. It's a body of solidarity. Unfortunately, my friends in the NDC do not appear to understand that. A party is a body of solidarity. It's a fighting organization. And, recently I've been toying with the idea of perhaps joining the party. I've spoken about it, and this last week I've returned to that same theme, talking to some of my friends. Maybe what I should do is just to go in. So I know that this is time for, you've been doing it on your program, time for registration. And I'm urging others who are concerned about this country. Clearly, the NPP is not an alternative. But the NDC in its current shape is not one either. But perhaps it's time to put all the talk to one side and to engage in the action. First, to say that this crookedness is happening at the instance and with the direct involvement of the president. And not to create this situation where the president appears to stand above it all, not aware of what is being done in his name and on his orders. We should not allow our president that wriggle room. Because if I recall, a few years back, under the tenure of President Mahama, he was not allowed that room. You recall? There was no occasion when an accusation or a charge of corruption did not go straight to him. And the argument was that he is the boss, he is in charge, the buck stops with him. The buck stops with our president. All the crookedness, whether it is with the Bost oil matter, or the cash for seats matter, or whatever, is being done and superintended by the president, by his assigns, by persons he has appointed. You must no longer commit this crime against the Ghanaian people by giving the impression that somehow this is happening and he does not know about it. I think that any such poster is a crime against the Ghanaian taxpayer. The president is right at the center. He knows about it. He's involved in it. It is being done with his agreement and approval. And that is where we must start from. And when we do that, we'll be very clear about what decisions the Ghanaian people will come to. Not assist with this song and dance which tries to absorb and keep the president out of it. Whether it is with the vigilante matter, whatever it is. He's right in there. He's at the heart of it. He's superintending it. He's supervising it. It's being done with his approval, if not prior knowledge. And that's the way we should go. Ultimately, the price that we pay for it will be a political price. It does not matter what conclusions the judge comes to, or the Supreme Court, or whoever comes to. Ultimately, the price we paid for this just sheer, effrontery, for the disrespect that has been shown to the Ghanaian people, be a political price. That's a way to address this.
Thank you, Dr. Percy, for your submission. That brings us to 27 after 10. Going through your text messages I have so far. Lots and lots of text messages. This one says, good morning to you, Eshen, and to your able panelists. Frankly speaking, the president has done well by suspending the Upper West Regional Minister to pave way for the investigation. But why was Kenneth Oyatano suspended pending Shua's investigation into the infamous Kenbot scandal? Also, why didn't he suspend Carlos Ahenkwa, Alfred Obeng, and many other errant appointees who were in similar situations? A.U. Faru from Tamale sent that message through. This one from Samuel Kwame Akoto. Sami says, please, how come? Okay, Sami, you have a concern about microphones in the studio. Well noted. Tafa from Amran here says, I find it very difficult to understand the motive behind the president's decision to ask the Upper West Regional Minister to step aside, because similar worse things happen under some ministers, but president didn't push them aside. Like I mentioned, the Ministry of National Security, Kou East MP, the Honorable Champon, who called his people to attack and kill Fulanis who are in the area. I can also mention BA Regional Minister, whom the NPP Regional Party Executive accused of corruption and violence, and you go on with lots and lots of details. This one here, from Musa Abatwa in Kumasi, he says, Shen, I'm happy Honorable Adongo is throwing more light on the $2.25 billion bond issue. Minority has the right to invoke Article 82 to impeach the finance minister to step aside. It's in the right direction. $2.25 billion bond smells of corruption, conflict of interest, and insider trading. After unprecedented borrowing, nothing to show. The contractors are suffering because not a single contract awarded since they took office. Where is the money? That's your concern. I am glad you brought Honorable Isaac Adongo to the show this morning. You should be making him make appearances in the days ahead of us. And that's from Messi on Facebook. Abubakar Isa Jalo. Okay, he sends the message. Okay, I think I've read this message already. Let me get this one. Okay, let me quickly shift and go to Twitter and read a few of the tweets that have also gotten to me this morning. This one from Aaron Odua Mason says, Ghana's underdevelopment is not about the style of governance, it's about how we as a people over the years dealt with issues that border on national interest. If it is my party, it is good. If it's not my party, it is not good. That's the problem at Radio Gold. 905 FM. Okay, you sent that one. This one from Habib in Sawam says, good morning to you and your wonderful panelists. Honorable Adongo is a gem. The corruption in the Cameroon is clear for all to see. Today, corruption and insecurity is the order of the day in Ghana. Kenneth Fuyata should honorably resign. Even the economy is in a coma. AU Farouk sends the message, yes, that minority leadership call for the finance minister to resign is a step in the right direction. The finance minister is always putting unnecessary pressure on Ghanaians. He must go. He is incompetent. Delanyo Agbe says the president couldn't set aside his finance minister over the $2.25 billion bond, but was swift to suspend the Upper West minister in 24 hours. Stephen Kominatu says, this bond of $2.25 billion has become an albatross on the neck of government. Exiting Oforiatta is the only solution to this. And then this one, okay, let me see. I believe that should be it. Let me just quickly go to some others, which I have this morning and share them with you before we move on to our next topic for this morning, which has to do with the suspension of the Upper West Regional Minister and investigations commencing into the attack of the original NADMO officer and concerns that are being raised. This one from Texan. Texan sends the message, it's glaringly obvious that the Akufo-Addo and the NPP government are perpetuating fraud on the people of Ghana. Can you ask Honorable Adongo what has become of the complaints the minority made to the SEC in the US of A? Ken Oforiatta is only going to court to insulate himself from future criminal prosecution. Thanks. And you sent that one from London. Okay, Halliston. You sent this one. And lawyer Chris Akume sends the message. Same, I'm happy Ken Oforiatta is heading to court. Honorable Adongo or any other Ghanaian must apply to join as interested party to oppose him. And that's the message you sent through today. Those are the messages that have gotten to me already. Yours can also come through. I will acknowledge them and read them live on the show. So, on the suspension of the Upper West Regional Minister, I begin with Comrade Mutala.
Sean, I just think that first and foremost for me is a charade of the president attempting to hoodwink Ghanaians into believing that he is who he claimed he was before the elections. After there has been incessant, complaints from well-meaning Ghanaians, of course, a section of the Ghanaian public that are spectators certainly didn't see anything wrong with the kind of instability and the chaos and anarchy that we have experienced in this country under President Nana Addo. It is also important that you can't have this discussion without putting it in context. What the fear was by many people, some of whom were very close to the then candidate Nana Addo, and the possibility of he given the mandate to govern this country and the impending chaos and anarchy that was going to befall us as a people. And these are not my own imaginations. These are public statements and pronouncements that were made by people. You remember President then candidate Nana Addo was described as a danger to democracy in Ghana and democracy in the continent of Africa. And if you look at the civil society groups and think tank that describe him as such, did so based on his pronouncement in the past. You also remember the statement that was made by his bosom friend and childhood friend in the person of Kofi Kumsin, in fact a leading member of the NPP, when he said that I cannot sleep to see Nana Addo become the president of the Republic of Ghana. He never expatiated on that statement, but clearly you didn't need a soothsayer to tell you that it was a suspicion or an impending danger should we give President, then candidate Nana Addo, the chance to govern this country. Kofi Komsen is not an NDC member. He has never been one. Kofi Komsen has been one of, if you like, senior journalists in this country who at a point in time contested NPP parliamentary primaries and who is a known NPP member and who is also a long-time friend, very close friend to our current president. And he said that I cannot sleep. I won't be able to sleep to see my friend being the president of the Republic of Ghana. Now, there were a lot of people who warned the people of this country that this man is a danger to our democracy, is a danger to our stability, is a danger to the peace and tranquility and the cohesion that exists among the Ghanaian people. Aside even these pronouncements that were made by people closer to him, his rhetorics, when he was a member of parliament, you witness the kind of violence that were perpetrated in his constituency under his beheads. You also remember when he led demonstrations in which many people lost their lives. When he had the opportunity to be the Minister for Justice and Attorney General, families of those people were begging for justice, and the justice has never come. Now, you also remember his pronouncements when he traveled and then met NPP functionaries across the globe, the kind of statements he made to them. And in fact, we cannot also forget the statement that was made by President Kufuor about the danger of electing Mr. Nana Addo as the president of the Republic of Ghana. Unfortunately, we never heeded. We gave him the mandate, and the NPP craftily succeeded in rebranding him. They succeeded in rebranding him. They succeeded in making him appear as someone who was peaceful, as someone who was anti-violence, when all his actions demonstrated to one point, and all his actions converge at a point that can be described as a point of chaos and anarchy. So it is not surprising to many people, particularly those of us young ones, at least, who witnessed what he said, what he did, and also read a lot of things that have been said about him, are experiencing what we are experiencing today. So to that extent, you cannot discuss violence. You cannot discuss his unwillingness to crack the whip when it comes to violence perpetrated against political opponents. You cannot discuss this, without talking about this history, without talking about the fear that was expressed by people. I think that those who expressed those fears have been vindicated. I think that Mr. Kofi Komsen has been absolutely vindicated. I think that the security civil society groups that describe him as a danger to Ghana's democracy and peace and stability in this country have been vindicated. Now again, before the elections, all die be die. That statement was not made out of nothing. In psychology, there is something we call the unconscious mind. And the unconscious mind is revealed through what the psychologists call free association. You can reveal that either through long conversation or dreams or wishes or when you're angry and others. And clearly he demonstrated that. Now, under his watch, these terror groups, they are terror groups defined by the AU Convention on the Prevention of Terrorism. They describe terror groups as people who perpetrate terror, destroys properties that belong to either societies or any group or even institutions. So Delta Force, invisible forces, call them Bulgar Bulldogs, they are all terror groups. And they are formed under the auspices of the then candidate Nana Addo. There is no denying the fact that these groups are being supervised and financed and aided by the Flagstaff House. There is no denying that fact. There is no denying the fact that what we are witnessing today is something that we were warned that we're going to experience should we make the mistake and being hoodwinked into giving this man the mandate to govern this country. There's no denying that fact. Now, you have a government that is under pressure to walk the talk that sweetly he has been talking for decades, when clearly his actions point to the opposite. Now, you have that president who is looking for the softest, if you like, prey. the softest of all. Now, if you read the statement that was issued by the Flagstaff House in the wake of an allegation of a regional minister, obstructing police from discharging their responsibilities and duties in arresting people who were engaged in acts of violence, people who indeed allegedly participated in crime and attacked a state agency, and for which reason the police, we are told, with the reports that we have had, that the police wanted to arrest those people, and that the regional minister said that they should go, he will bring those people. Now the Flagstaff House comes out, issued a statement that the man has been suspended. First and foremost, there is no any grounding in law by the president in demonstrating what he demonstrated. And that is why I listened to Honorable Ayaraga on my way here, and many other people who said that the president should tell us the provision in the Constitution or any law that the president is invoking in this clear violation of rules and regulations governing not only the conduct of his appointees but his own conduct. There hasn't been done. I have listened to a lot of our friends in the NPP who are attempting to take refuge in Article 197 of the 1992 Constitution. As a matter of fact, Article 197 of the 1992 Constitution has said nothing about suspension. The president has the powers to sack the minister. If the president is convinced that the minister engaged in an act that is not in sync with his principles and beliefs, the president should go ahead and sack the minister. But the president cannot tell us that we are suspending the minister pending investigation. As a matter of fact, suspension itself is punishment. That is punishment. So on what basis is the president suspending someone pending an investigation? And that very statement says that the suspension is done pending the investigation that is yet to be conducted into it. We haven't been told that the president called the minister to put his side of the story. Eshon, assuming tomorrow another group of persons come out and say that the Minister of Finance authorized people to attack us, and the next day another institution, individuals come and say that the attack we are experiencing was authorized by the senior minister, will the president do same? I tell you, the president wouldn't do same. So for you to suspend somebody, first and foremost, without any grounding in law, for you to suspend somebody on the basis of an allegation that is made upon that person. Now, how will the presence of that minister as the regional minister obstruct any investigation that is going to be conducted into this issue? Now, another funny argument that is being peddled and of course captured in the statement that was issued by the Flagstaff House. Why? We had the Minister of Finance who was engaged in a fraudulent and dubious 2.25 billion bond, the extent to which the investigation was not only done by the government, was done by a statutory body, Shraj. Did the president ask his cousin, the minister, to suspend him pending any investigation? Did he do that? Now, another case has to do with the cash for seat, where a series of allegations have been made, and you have a body, an institution like Parliament, that commenced investigation into that matter. Did the president suspend the Minister for Trade and Industries? Now, if you want to go that far, the first time we have had this thing happened at the seat of government, where you have a police officer who was molested, manhandled, beaten at the seat of His Excellency the President. Perhaps he should have suspended himself pending any investigation into the beating of Nanka Bruce at the seat of president. Instead, what the president and the government did, that we are not interested in any investigation. We are only interested in the person who took the video footage. You remember? That was the focus of the Flagstaff House. Now, I am saying that there is no any basis. And in any case, even if you have any information that we do not know, and as a president, he is in a position to have information that we do not know. Perhaps the national security and the BNI would have informed the president that the regional minister actually indeed instructed the boys to go and engage in that act. Perhaps. Now, if indeed the president has any information that we do not have, and that information points to the complicity or the direct involvement of the regional minister of Upper West region, then the president has no business in allowing the man to be in office. Fire him. Fire him. You know what the president has done? He has just picked a soft spot, someone he can easily pick on, to showcase that when I say I would stamp and crack the whip, I have started demonstrating that willingness to do what? To crack the whip. And that is precisely what His Excellency, the President, has done in this matter. Yes, let me do that to showcase that I have. In Brona region, you have the regional youth organizer of the NPP who went to Atebobu, and this gentleman was beaten to pulp. Beaten to pulp. The gentleman alleged that he was beaten by boys belonging to the regional minister. The gentleman also alleged that the regional minister masterminded that. Why didn't the president ask the regional minister? Why didn't the president suspend the regional minister pending any investigation? Why didn't he? I listened to, I don't know who you were interviewing, and the person said that this is the first time you have a direct, leading party member involvement on my way in the matter. And I said that is not true. In the case of the Delta Force attacking a court of competent jurisdiction in this country, you had Kennedy Ajapong, who is a leading party member. As a matter of fact, a member of parliament got involved in it and said that nothing should happen to them. In that same case, you have the national secretary, the acting national secretary, who said that they were not going to disband those groups and that they are their boys. Now, another case has to do with the bust, where there was glaring robbery and thievery perpetrated by bust through the direction of this government and the president. And in that case, the president claimed, in fact, the government claimed there was an investigation by BNI. At the very time they were telling us these lies, this cooked so-called investigation, the Minister for Energy was also constituting another committee to investigate the bust, fraud and thievery. And in that committee included a representation of the very body they claim had investigated it. Why didn't the president ask the boss gentleman to step aside or suspend him pending any investigation? Why didn't he do that? Manasseh only wrote and indicted directly, personally, the president. And in his file, he said that he has picked information close to the presidency, that the president was directly involved in preventing any action taken against the boss man, and even said in his folder that the president reprimanded the Minister for Energy for even attempting to investigate the thievery perpetrated on the people of this country at Bust. Not a single response have I heard from the president or anybody contrary to these serious and chilling allegations made by Manasseh against no less a person than the president of the Republic of Ghana. So in the eyes of all these compelling evidences, why didn't the president ask the boss gentleman to step aside or suspend him pending any investigation?
Right.
So, Sean, this so-called suspension is a complete joke. It's an attempt to deceive Ghanaians the more. And it's a charade of the president attempt, or if you like, cracking the whip to showcase to the people of this country, henceforth, I am going to be committed in ensuring that these things are done. Be it as it may, I will be happy to see the president beginning to demonstrate that he holds his own. I would commend the president if indeed, regardless his inability to act in the previous incidences, if the president is now telling us that yes, I am beginning to act responsibly as a president and crack the whip using this regional minister, even though it's a soft spot, if the president is demonstrating that, that will be well and good. Because we live in a country, Sean, and within 1 month, you have 4 police officers killed. 1 month. This has never happened in this country. You live in a country where police officers themselves are begging and crying for protection. The very people who are clothed with the authority, the power, to protect our lives themselves are crying for their safety and their protection, it tells you that we are not in normal times. Right. And until something is done about this, the better. Perhaps they are so protected, perhaps they have the requisite skill, the power to protect themselves. We do not. And the 53% of the people of this country who gave this president the mandate to govern today have a responsibility also to speak out. And this tells you that the signals, the warnings that unfortunately some of us didn't heed is what is confronting us today in this country.
All right.
So we are in difficult times. We are in a state of chaos and anarchy. And frankly, it's a symptom of a decay of security and the protections of the people of this country. Because that for me is extremely worrying. Where you have security agencies who are demotivated, where you have security agencies who stand by without the capacity to act. The collusion, the connivance that was captured on tape by then CID, what's the name? Is it Echiwa? The lady. Look, to some extent, I said it here. I may not blame the woman so much, even though she demonstrated gross, unprofessionalism, but the woman was simply protecting her bread and butter. Look at the incident of the regional security coordinator. You saw police officers who were standing there, who had the capacity to have prevented what happened. Why is it that they didn't prevent that? They couldn't have done that. Under this same government, you have terror groups who have held press conference and said that nobody can arrest them.
All right.
Under this same government, last point, Ishon. Now, when you have the molestation of the same appointee of His Excellency the President, the regional security coordinator. Now, the man, they go to court, they use a fraudulent process to gather evidence for prosecution. Of course, garbage in is garbage out. Now, that man himself says that he is not willing to come and give witness, yet he's still at post. Now, if criminal matters are matters that belong to the state, you have government appointee, a regional security coordinator, molested, and then the same government says, come and give us witness. And now that government comes out to tell us that the man is not willing to give witness, yet he is still at post.
Right,
the first thing His Excellency the President should have done was to sack the man for not willing to stem this. Yet the President left the man there, only for you to come and pick this up.
I would have to pause you here so other panel members can have their take before we exhaust our time today. I'll jump straight to you, Honorable Adongo.
Well, Shan, I think this issue about the suspension of the regional minister is much ado about nothing. We live in a country where there is insecurity. We live in a country where the commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces has lost control over security. We live in a country where the structure for managing national security has evolved to the point where the security corps, including the regional security councils, don't have control over security matters. And therefore, when you begin to see this kind of half-hearted actions that don't go to the bottom of the insecurity as a means of addressing our national security concern, then you and I should be worried. What is the issue at stake? The matter at issue is basically that there was an attack on the NADMO office in the Upper West region. Whatever security briefing the president has had, I do not know. But subsequently, the regional minister was made to step aside whilst investigations continue. One would have wished that as we speak, those elements that attacked the NADMO office would have been arrested by now. Then we know that you are getting to the bottom of the issue. So the regional minister stepped aside because a state institution has been attacked, and so what? And so the perpetrators are left the hook to roam the streets and attack the next state institution. So clearly, you want to understand the ultimate impact of the action in terms of addressing the concrete issue that must be dealt with. That concrete issue that must be dealt with is the lack of security in our communities, which is reflecting in the inability of state institutions to have proper protection, which is reflecting in total disregard for security systems in our communities by elements of this government, members of the political party that has formed this government, who are more powerful than security couples. And if these people cannot be dealt with by the commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces, you think that a regional minister can. And therefore, by asking the regional minister to step aside, you are basically scratching the surface and finding a scapegoat that diverts our attention from a proper discussion of what it is that we've lost control over and how do we get back on track in fixing those challenges. That is the first point. If you have a country where insecurity and insubordination and clear criminality becomes the subject of tussle of senior members of this government in terms of who can protect who and in terms of who does not benefit from the supposed illegality, then you have a bigger question to address. We are in this country where Kennedy Japan has openly condemned the national security minister for attempting to arrest and prosecute elements of the MPP who took a whole court like a movie in action. And he makes a point that the national security minister himself is the direct beneficiary of the misconduct of this group of people. And that, but for the fact that these invisible and other forces had put their lives on the line, there wouldn't have been an MPP government and there wouldn't have been a national security minister for Ken Kwandapa. Was it the regional minister who said this? What was the effort of the president to back his national security minister? What security briefings did the commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, get from his national security minister? In the end, you think that if the court premises are not safe, NADMO offices will be safe. And that by merely asking this man who has no powers to stop invisible forces to go and stay at home, suddenly NADMO offices will not be attacked anymore. Clearly, this is a lame duck president who has lost his way. His primary responsibility is to make you and I sleep soundly. In fact, we can't even walk around soundly, let alone to sleep soundly. And he thinks that a regional minister's suspension is the panacea to an escalating national security concern. So, the Ashanti regional minister, where is he? Whose responsibility was it to ensure that the regional security coordinator in Ashanti region was not attacked? In fact, a whole security coordinator could not survive the wrath of those marauding forces. You think that regional minister can? What did the president know about Ken Ejapon and those forces who invaded the court? That on a daily basis, he bragged about his correspondence with them and the kinds of intercessions he had made to the powers that be to ensure that those people are not harmed. At the end, what happened? They said there was no evidence. Is that not what they said at first? Nolle prosequa. This government of nolle prosequa for criminal conduct is now not filing the same nolle prosequa in Upper West region, but are finding reason to suspend a regional minister for people who eventually will be arrested and nolle prosequa will be filed against them. So this regional minister, I feel pity for him, because he's not a solution to the problem. In fact, that regional minister was not in northern region when the National Health Insurance offices were being attacked. In fact, this regional minister was not the one who told the vigilante groups and MPP youth to take positions when the elections are over. And these people actually took positions by moving into offices and removing people and occupying seats, as if national appointments are made based on who sits on what seat first. So, what happened to the regional minister in the Upper West region when these vigilante groups were taking positions in direct obedience to the almighty Awuku's instructions? That they should not be waiting for job because he himself is going to take position. What haven't we seen? So, the regional minister, Upper West regional minister, what was his crime? When the forces invaded Temaport to take positions, the commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces has lost his way. He has plunged this country into unprecedented insecurity. And no amount of window dressing would give us peace. And I want to request him to stop the hypocrisy, to stop the lip service, and deal with the issue head on. He, the president himself, keep every day complaining about insecurity. So what can I do if the president is about complaining? Every opportunity, he complains about insecurity. And yet, the securities apparatus are at his beck and call. And he reduces all of this. Okay, so something happened at Kwabenya recently. A life was lost. What has happened to the regional minister in the Greater Accra region? Who is the head of the Regional Security Council? In Upper West, we are merely talking about office. This one, a life of an officer in the line of duty was lost. Where is the regional minister of Greater Accra region? This Kokoku football must stop. Looking at the face and nature of individuals and tagging them to make it seem you are making an effort cannot suffice. Where is the national security minister in all of this shooting of police and security officers in line of duty? In fact, the first reshuffle should have affected him and the interior minister long ago. They are still sitting there and they are now suspending regional ministers. This your confused security arrangement where you have national security, interior minister, security coordinator, very confused arrangement, with so much resources pumped into it and delivering nothing. You turn around and say, Upper West, what is the name of the Upper West regional minister? Alhaji who? Alhaji Salfusani. Does it even ring bell in MPP hierarchy of who is who? Does the name ring a bell? So, invisible forces don't fear Kendapa, and you think that they should be saluting Alhaji Salif or whoever you call it. What kind of governance are we experiencing? I have no problem if by suspending that man we can go to sleep at peace. But this man you have suspended, you are only going to deny him a few quids to take care of his family at the end of the month. While the perpetrators, I wish by now there would have been a soup of some perpetrators who are arrested, and then we'll have a conversation to start. So, o suspend the regional minister no confo no modi bone no omo wo he. Huh? They've been arrested. Okay. I hope that there will be no nolle prosequa. I hope that they are not going to be varying the charges every now and then until they find a charge that will get them to escape. But there are bigger national security issues that have to be addressed. The silence of the president, the inaction of the president and his security couples are so loud that everybody is beginning to take cover. Everybody now is beginning to take cover, because now if you decide that some people are going to attack you and you are picking a call and phone, you say you are going to call a police office, the police officer won't come. I hear these days they do susu to buy fuel into their cars. The police officers do susu from their salary to buy fuel. Why wouldn't they collect 2 cedis and 1 cedi by the roadside to fuel the cars? And you sit at the Flagstaff house and all that you do is to speak big English and issue long letters. This has to stop. And the big fishes must be made to pay for what is happening. They should call Kennedy Japan. He will tell them who should be fired. And that if the president is not willing to fire and bring in new vim, he should give appropriate backing to his ministers so his ministers can work without fear or favor. In the absence of that, he should spare us these gimmicks. They won't help anybody.
Thank you very much, Honorable Adongo. I'll come straight to you, Dr. David Percy.
You know, well, I don't know what else I can add. You have a government of conmen, essentially. So that anything that they do, even if it is well-intentioned, cannot be accepted on face value. But a number of points preliminary. There's this point about the fact that under our constitution, the president cannot suspend a minister. A minister is either there or is not there. Okay. But maybe our president can point to a precedent. I believe something happened like that with the precious Mr. Anani. Dr. Richard Anani, yes. I think he was asked to step aside.
But he was still acting as the minister.
Yeah, but he was asked to step aside, kind of. That was a precedent. Okay. Maybe it was not challenged then. And so that is what gives weight to what is being done now. But, you know, looking in from the outside, you see a government that is basically improvising, on every occasion. Now, Honorable Adongo has made a point that the president is the commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces. He's also the commander-in-chief of the MPP paramilitary. Okay. People have taken to calling them vigilante, whatever it is. But the president set out deliberately as candidate Nana Akufo-Addo, as a leader of the MPP, to set up a paramilitary force. In a certain sense, I hold the government of the NDC responsible for that. It was done right under their nose, in the open. Indeed, some of the people who facilitated that are now parading as captains of business and telling us how we should go about organizing our lives. And they are the toasts of our media people. It was done in broad daylight. The cover was that they had no faith in the police force, I believe. And when the opportunity was available to lay this thing out very clearly and bring people to book, it was messed up, and the mercenaries who had come in for that purpose were deported. But all of that is history now. Now the president has to show that, but he basically has to juggle between being commander-in-chief of the Ghana Forces and being commander-in-chief of the MPP paramilitary, and that's proving to be a very difficult task. After much talk and bluster, something has to give. And so the poor, hapless minister, regional minister for the Upper West, offered his neck, so to speak. But even so, it has not been chopped off completely. Okay? Suspension gives the impression that you may be recalled. Although listening to authoritative persons, people who know about the workings of the MPP, they say the man has been sacked. Okay? And I noticed in all the media reports, at least the newspapers that are favorable to the MPP, they spoke about minister fired, minister fired, minister fired. Okay. So the word suspension is a term of art to disguise the fact that he has been sacked. But with respect to his sensibilities, even so, I realized that it hasn't completely worked. Because a lot of the commentary that has gone on since, what you hear people hinting about, which they don't quite see, is that the man has been sacrificed because he's not a core account. All the huffing and puffing basically suggests that. And this is happening even within, commentaries and texts and comments by persons who otherwise have MPP sympathies. That why him when others have done things which are more grievous? And I think there was a sophist on your program who was saying that, on other occasions there were not appointees. Who you were having an interview? Was it you?
Maybe Peter.
There was an interview on your program. I think it was yesterday or maybe 2 days ago, saying that this has happened with the minister because he's a direct appointee. The others may be party, militant, whatever it is, but he's an appointee. And that's why the president has done what he has done. But for me, it opens up interesting prospects. Now, the business of, and all of this is around the central issue of jobs for the boys. We know that a central plank of the NPP's campaign was the issue of unemployment. We know that the members of the NPP paramilitary who were recruited had a clear understanding that come victory, they'll have jobs. And one of them, incidentally, I thought it was going to become part of our conversation, was this attempt to, or it has been consummated, to recruit security people for Parliament. Okay. Now the MPP will exploit every avenue to do that. Now, in the middle of all of this, we've ignored the fact that all the key positions in the NADMO, because this is happening with the NADMO, have been assigned to MPP organizers. In fact, regional organizers, constituency organizers, district organizers, whatever. People have taken positions appropriately, as was indicated by their commander, one of the key commanders, Mr. Samuel Oku. So all of this thing is happening in the context of people finding places, taking positions. Now, what the edict appears to be is that, look, these are our own people. We'll do whatever to advance their interests, to protect them. But don't do it in such a way that you are caught. Certainly not on tape, not on camera. Okay? I don't know whether it is in that same context that I hear that the majority is thinking about coming forward with a law that makes it criminal to make secret recordings. I don't know whether that is connected with it. You know, making secret recordings. Are you aware of that? Okay. There's rumors about people coming up with a law to make it illegal to make secret recordings. That will be complete and utter rubbish. But that tells you how far people are willing to go. Okay. So the next weeks and months are going to be really, really very interesting, because far from this incident abating, I can see them becoming more and more aggravated. Okay, because the jobs that were promised are not materializing. Just yesterday, I read on one of the crawlers that you see on the screen that allowances for, is it trainee nurses or this thing, 2-month allowances were being removed. Okay, allowances for 2 months. Okay, so you can see that increasing as we go forward. You have a government that is challenged in even keeping up with the initial interventions that it has made towards fulfilling its electoral promises, increasing pressure on the finances. There's a story about Ghanaian military attaches being thrown out of their rented premises abroad. There are many, many signs that you can see of a government that is clearly under pressure, balancing the books, keeping its promises. And so all I can say is going forward is that you're going to have more and more of these incidents. It will be truly interesting to see what the president does on each and every occasion. But basically, the key theme, the key word to underline is improvisation. So depending on the circumstances, something will have to be put together and the spin doctors and the sophists to be put to work to explain. Because yesterday was it yesterday or 2 days ago? Yesterday, I was struck by the talking heads who were brought out to come and speak to how the president was showing resolve. Okay, they brought out a certain, I think it was the head of political science in Legon. Okay, it's becoming fast and notorious as a spin doctor for the MPP. Then they also brought out the revered Dr. I forget his name. The honorary should be my friend, Doctor. He's the head of IDEC. Dr. Akwiti, yes.
Akwiti.
Yes, okay. They were all speaking to. I realized that he has gone off his February horse of. What is it? Come on. This has been our power sharing and what's the word? All inclusive. No, it's the reverse of all inclusive.
Winner
takes all. Yes. It's suddenly he's abandoned that at least for now, until another NDC government comes to the power. So it was quite interesting. So basically what you have is improvisation. You put all the talking heads together to, tell how the president is honoring his promises. But after a while, all this wears very thin. Okay, you can do it for a few times. It has novelty. But after a while, it becomes threadbare. And that's the real pity. And for all these fine characters who have nailed their these things to the mast and out there in style defense of a government of crooks. For me, that is the real pity in all of this.
All right, Dr. David Percy. That brings us to 22 after 11. I come straight to Mr. Kwesi Pratt Jr.
Well, there's not a lot to say about this development. Unlike the other panelists, I think that this is an important step. And I believe that if the president had started acting like this, perhaps vigilantism would not have spread and degenerated, so much, over the period. This is an important step. This is the first time that the president is taking such a step. And I'm happy that he has taken this step. And I do hope that, we'll begin to see more actions like this in the coming days and years. I'm told that the young persons who perpetrated this acts of impunity have been arrested, they've been sent to court, and they've been remanded in custody. That's some movement forward, Yes, it is all right to speculate that eventually they may be freed. The state may file nolle prosequi, because it's happened before. It happened in Kumasi, and it can happen before. But I think this is the first time that the president has taken such a firm, strong stand, against a minister. There are legitimate questions to pose, and some of those legitimate questions have been posed. And one of those is, why was he suspended and not dismissed? Because here you have a minister who is actually instructing the police not to enforce the law. I'm told, and I hear some of the MPP communicators saying that he was suspended because there's going to be an investigation to establish the fact. The fact has already been established.
That is in the statement issued by Blaster House.
No, the fact has already been established. He instructed police not to enforce the law because party people were misbehaving. They were taking the law into their own hands and so on. So it's difficult to understand why he was merely suspended and not dismissed. Now, yesterday I had an interview that was carried out on this station. I think the interview was done by Samir Shen, who is here, of somebody who calls himself a governance expert.
Oh, that was Peter.
Governance expert. And he claimed that suspension is the same as dismissal. And I was really shocked, And he said, look, yes, the president has suspended. And as for this president, when he suspends, he means dismissal. Yeah. And that brought my mind back to the internal difficulties of the New Patriotic Party, the suspension of Paul Afoko and others. Because effectively, that suspension is beginning to look like a dismissal. And perhaps that governance expert knows more than the rest of us do know. Yes. Perhaps he knows more than we do know. But apart from these questions, I think that the president has acted well, and I hope that he will continue to act like this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pratt, for your submission. That brings us to some 34 more minutes before we check out of here. Let me read a few of the text messages I've received today. And next 30 minutes, if there are any points anybody wants to make with respect to these two issues we tabled for discussion today, I believe we can touch on them. Matthias Deladem sent a message. I believe he was helping out Dr. David Percy when you were looking for the boss for IDEC, and so he sent us that name. This one, okay, let me get AU Farouk sends message. Okay, I think I have read this one already. Let me check some other messages that have come through on Twitter and read them before we leave the studios today. This one from Akoto says the Upper West Regional Minister's suspension by the president is hypocritical since similar incidents happened in the South. Why was no appointee suspended? Akoto Razak sends that from Tamale. Aaron Odua Mensah sends the message. Years back, every cent of corruption was hanged at the neck of the president and it was applauded. Now, if same is applied, it is considered as disrespect to the presidency. We are joking big time. Official Santa sends the message. Clearly, President Akufo-Addo has demonstrated he doesn't know what he's doing as the commander of the Ghana Armed Forces, and his inability to reason tactfully to nip this vigilante hooliganism in the bud is the problem. Hack BS sends the message. And your guest today, I'm enjoying the light being thrown on the issues. In fact, this $2.25 billion bond has a tough implication on we Ghanaians, but I'm sad the so-called socio-economic indicators that had kept mute on the matter. The government, the NPP government clearly has no sympathy for taxpayers. You sent that one through. Hack BS Abiyo Isuman sends the message. Same, have you forgotten Malam Isa? He was the first to have suffered under President Kufuor, and the next to suffer after him is the Upper West Regional Minister Suleimana. He is also a Northerner, so the Northerners are the first to always suffer in any NPP government. So they should take note because they will always suffer. And those are a few of the text messages I managed to receive today on the show. Hadi from Pig Farm sent me this message. Let me read it. Ghanaians are getting increasingly disturbed that the president does not yet have an economic direction. There is no anchor, no clarity. All we are getting are fake messages, sweet statements, rhymes, promises. And so far, there is no proper articulation to give us an idea of where we are headed. The president and his team are not correcting the many dots that are not connecting. There is no roadmap, no coherence. A few months after talking over an economic projected to perform well in 2017 and confirmed by Senior Minister Yaosaf Mafo, Mother Ghana is now neck deep in an economic crisis. Our economic situation requires an emergency reaction. That's from Hadi from Pig Farm, sending that to me on the show, and I believe that should be it for the very many text messages that I received today. So, any final comments on the issues we tabled for discussion? Panel members?
I'd like to make one comment
Okay.
and then run away. And it has to do with the whole controversy over the Shraj report on the $2.5 billion
2.25.
$2.25 billion bond. There's a dispute over what was declared on the assets declaration form of the minister. That dispute should lead us somewhere. The minister claims that he did declare all his companies. Shraj says he did not. How are we ordinary mortals,
Citizens.
well, able to participate in this discussion? Because we don't have the assets declaration form. I mean, the assets declaration is a secret. I think that this calls for a review of the assets declaration regime in the country. So far, the law says that you fill the declaration, you hand it over to the Auditor General, the Auditor General locks it up in his drawer. And until a court makes an order or something happens, it's there. Nobody cares whether the declaration is correct or not correct, whether what has been declared exists or doesn't exist. Nobody cares. You understand? So I think that we need to review the assets declaration regime. There has been some battle over whether or not spouses should also declare their assets. And it has been ding-dong over the period since 1993. I recall that when the NPP was in opposition in 1993, the NPP promised then that if they ever came to power, the assets declaration regime would change. They came to power in 2001 and did nothing about the assets declaration regime for 8 years. The NDC then came into opposition and also promised to do something about the assets declaration regime. They came to power in 2008, stayed in office for 8 years and did absolutely nothing about the assets declaration regime. This controversy over what has been declared or not declared by the minister should lead us to review the assets declaration regime. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt. Any comments, Dr. Percy?
Two issues. First, that's indigency. That will not happen so long as our politics remains the way it is. Second, just a minor point about the situation of insecurity. Now, one of the key challenges is the insecurity of the state security officials if they do their job. In every instance we know, when crimes, infractions of the law involve political officials, police officers check themselves and they decide whether it is proper to act or not to act. Okay, and that would have been the same situation with this situation in the upper west, except that on this occasion it was decided to make an example. Okay, and I noticed with the kind of coverage that it has had on Joy News, etc., that there's an elaborate orchestration about this to demonstrate that the president will brook no nonsense. So at the heart of this is the insecurity of state security officials if they do the right thing. Who born dog if you do the right thing without checking? You see.
Any comments?
Yes, I want to comment on, unfortunately we didn't have enough time to discuss the last topic, which is that reckless statement made by the first deputy speaker. I think that it's becoming too many in this government that they make statements at any point in time. You also realize the directive to kill Fulani herdsmen if they meet them. And for me, the Fulani herdsmen, the wife of the Vice President, Samira, should be held very responsible because she was the one who went to every Fulani in this country and deceived them into voting NPP. And interestingly, when Fulanis are being killed, their cattle are killed. Samira is very quiet. You remember? In fact, I know vividly in places in the north, she went to every single village where Fulanis were. They gathered them, and she spoke in Fulani and told them to vote for NPP because they had their sister there. They voted. When they are being killed, their cattle are being killed left, right, and center. You don't see anything about Samira. And I think that the Fulanis everywhere, she's the one they should hold responsible, because you could not be hoodwinking them, deceiving them into voting your husband and the president into power, only for them to come, and there are directives. And people make such pronouncement with alacrity. They can kill the cattle, I mean, if a Fulani man commits any crime, what has the cattle done? Cattle are not controlled by themselves. And we live in a country that are governed by rules and regulations. And interestingly, under the scheme of MPP things, some Fulanis are more important than others. That is not suggestive that if any Fulani man violates any law, the law should not deal with them. Law should deal with them. But I am just shocked, the loud silence of the second lady when she had found her voice to go around everywhere, every village, at least I witnessed what she did in northern parts of the country, telling them to vote. If she couldn't do anything at all, at least she could have added her voice and calling on the government to act responsibly and decently and dealing with these people. Unfortunately, this thing is quiet, because if you have a first deputy speaker who will make such pronouncement, shoot and kill people who are engaged in galamsey operation. Yes, people are engaged in things that are illegal, but is that the way to deal with? And the shocking aspect of it is that this is a lawyer of standing, who has been in the bar for a very long time. For him to disregard, all these issues and just say that shoot and kill, clearly is somebody who can sanction mob justice. And I really don't think that it argues well for our democracy. He doesn't even have the decency to apologize. I thought in the eyes of all this, he could have apologized, perhaps blaming slip but expect that they won't do that. And I really don't think that is what argues well. I expect Parliament to hold him responsible so that he can explain the rationale behind this shoot and kill.
Thank you very much, Comrade. It looks like that will be all.
Yeah, no, but just a few pointers on the issue of the Ken bond. One, the grounds on which we are asking that he be removed be made very clear.
Okay.
The grounds are quite simple. One is that he has violated the Public Financial Management Act and the consequences that he should be removed. Two, he came to Parliament and lied to us that not a single law was broken. And he's also made a point at the time also that all the Bank of Ghana rules and regulations were followed, and basically photocopied those manuals for us. It turned out that every single significant Bank of Ghana guideline was sidestepped. So clearly he came to Parliament, looked us in the face and lied, and that is perjury. The other one is also on this asset declaration. The people of Ghana has to push very hard that you cannot be a finance minister whose biggest weapon is the taxes of the people of Ghana. And you yourselves have demonstrated that you don't believe in paying taxes by operating companies in tax safe havens. So who should be contributing taxes for you to manage? And it is a major question on the declaration form that he needed to disclose those companies and for us to have a conversation around what the motive is in operating companies in tax safe havens. If the motive is to ensure that you don't pay taxes, and then at the end of the day, you want the people of Ghana to pay taxes for you. So we need to deal with that matter and deal with it squarely. But finally, my biggest concern for this Minister of Finance is the trajectory of moving our public financial management activities to an emergency regime, where every day we are borrowing in a way that is not even on the calendar. And almost every single quarter, this minister appears not to know our financial requirements and continues to engage in reckless emergency borrowing of billions that do not give the state the opportunity to seek for cheaper sources of funding and to be competitive. That in itself is the height of incompetence if really it is not meant for rent seeking. And I do believe that enough grounds exist. And I want to make the point that this idea that the people came asking for conflict of interest and therefore you shouldn't have investigated how bonds are issued and the rest, and that you are going to court because Shraj went beyond what it was asked to do, is akin to saying that if you found a criminal and you suspected that the criminal was dealing in cocaine and you swoop in his house and you didn't find cocaine but you found fake money printing machine with fake currency, you leave him because you went there to look for cocaine. You didn't go there to look for fake currency. That is my word.
Thank you, Honorable Adongo. Dr. Bessie.
Yes. Are we going to the next, or are we just
Oh,
talking?
if you want to comment on it, we have some few minutes.
How many minutes we have?
Usually you don't take a lot of the time, so I'll give the whole 15 minutes to you.
Oh, 15 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You're being very generous today.
Oh, I am always.
Yes, I think that the matter of the our finance minister is simply a crook. There's nothing else to describe his activity. He's been placed there to ensure that money is made. It is very simple. Who is responsible for that? Our president. So this song and dance and this thing, the Honorable Adongo spoke about him putting this thing on an emergency regime, suggesting that it is incompetence. It is deliberate. Okay? And actually, I think the task for the Honorable Adongo and for people like him is simply to follow the money, to do a calculus of what has happened over the last year of smart borrowing. The last year of smart borrowing. I mean, our president is at the heart of it. In fact, there was a voice clip of him speaking. I think it was on the eve of the event of this meet with the
press.
Yes. He spoke about how much savings they made to us on the basis of smart borrowing. Great. Smart borrowing, where you are reprofiling our debt, replacing expensive loans with even more expensive loans. Really, really smart. Okay? And that's where the money is being made. And I just made a calculus on the first 2.25, where on an annual basis, you have the equivalent of 5 Woyomes a year for the next 15 years. That's the cost to the Ghanaian taxpayer. Forget about what the issues around the Woyome case. But you have the equivalent of 5 Woyomes a year. And there's dead silence from the media cabal. Okay? They are waxing lyrical about how Mr. Woyome is going to be examined. What is it?
Oral examination.
Oral examination, and the things that are going to come out about a matter that was initiated under President Kufuor. Okay? And we know many things that have happened since. We are talking about a matter that is happening live now over the last 12 months. A pattern of crookedness. And there's no interest. One out of that, just one out of that, 10% of that is going to net the equivalent of 5 Woyomes a year to the crooks at our expense. It ought to be a matter of serious concern. We should not allow anybody to impose a wall of silence over this matter. And as I say, just follow the money. You just do a calculus. Work out the additional cost to the Ghanaian taxpayer and ask why it is happening on a consistent basis. It is not incompetence, it is crookedness. Okay. But on the matter of the statement by the first deputy speaker, okay, Mr. Joseph Osewusu, who happens to be a lawyer, right? Who is saying that we should shoot Galamseyers. He didn't add on site, but I presume that's what he meant. He's a lawyer, of course. So you would think that his recourse would be that of the due process. You'll arrest them, and if they are breaking a law, you would bring charges, and hopefully they'll go through the mill. But he's saying that we should shoot them. But this is not a legal matter. He's speaking not to a legal matter. He's reflecting the attitude, the consciousness, the posture of the very small stratum of Ghanaian society, who nevertheless dictate how most of us think, who maintain this situation where the Ghanaian state acts not in the interest of the Ghanaian working man, not in the interest of the Ghanaian working people, but acts to preserve Ghana as a safe haven for foreign investors and for foreign interests. Now, he's talking about Galamseyers. He's basically talking about small-scale miners. He's basically talking about Ghanaian miners, right? He has no problem with the foreign miners who are large-scale miners, okay, who are taking away our resources for a song. And I could go on and on and on. I mean, what I'm describing is the existence of what you might call the neo-colonial state. And that is true of the Ghanaian state and many states in Africa and other places, who consistently, persistently, regularly, without fail, act to defend the interests of foreign concerns against that of the inhabitants. Right? I believe he's an MP for, is it Bekwai? Yeah, so good. So the good people of Bekwai have elected him. Sure that many people in Bekwai may be engaged in Galamsey. Yes. Say that they should be shot out of hand. And that really is a problem. That over the last 500 years, we have cultivated a tiny stratum of society who started out as middlemen, intermediaries, interpreters, agents for foreigners. It has become established, especially along the coast, but in the Ghanaian consciousness, that you benefit when you act for a foreigner. There are benefits when state officials act for foreigners. And when people come into our country, they learn very quickly that, look, they get to know the price of a minister. They get to know the price of a superintendent of police or a commissioner of police. They get to know very quickly. If they have problems, they know who to call. If you have a problem with a foreign businessman, you're more likely to end up a loser. Because they know the ropes. They know who to call, who to intervene. Okay? And one interesting revelation last week, when the president was trying to torpedo the work of the committee on cash for seats, when he made a very interesting revelation about his relationship with one gentleman.
The Lebanese.
Yes, who said cooks the best Lebanese food. Okay. Who is known to him, perhaps was known to his father, I don't know. And certainly a family friend who he regularly visits. You understand? And that's the nature of our state. That in many circumstances, these interests know they have our leaders by the short and curly. They don't waste their time with quote-unquote procedures and the law. They know that many of them can be bought. They have a price tag for each one of them. And that's how they play us. So the key issue, okay, matter that keeps coming up all the time regularly, it doesn't matter what you're discussing about, whether it is the Gitmo 2 or whatever, is the fact that consistently Ghanaian public officers, elected officials, presidents, ministers, name them, regularly act not in our interests, but on the basis of the interests of others. That, 60 years after independence, remains our biggest challenge that we have to confront and address. But first we must understand it. It is that kind of thinking, that kind of outlook that will lead an elected official, the first deputy speaker no less, to make such a reckless and irresponsible statement. But you can guarantee your bottom dollar that nothing will happen to him as a result.
All right. Doc, I'm grateful that you made your final submission, and gentlemen, I'm grateful as well that per the invitation that was extended to you, you decided to hit the call to do justice to the issues on behalf of all of us. My guests have been Mr. Kwesi Pratt Jr., Managing Editor of The Insight, Comrade Murtala Ibrahim Mohammed, former MP for Nanton and a former Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry, Dr. David Percy, that you just heard, as a student of history and politics, the Honorable Isaac Adongo, a member of Parliament for Bolga Tanga Central. They join me to look at the minority in Parliament's call for the Finance Minister to resign, whilst he heads to sue Shraj and matters arising, a thorough discussion on the suspension of the Upper West Regional Minister as investigation is conducted into the attack of the regional NADMO office. And we touched briefly on the call by the Honourable First Speaker, Deputy Speaker of Parliament, the Honourable Joe Osei-Wusu's call for galamseyers to be shot in the matter of illegal mining in Ghana. My name is Sami Eshen. Production is being by Patrick Asfobodu. We will be here again, God willing, next week Saturday. I'm grateful that you made time to join us on Alhaji and Alhaji, the mother of all talk shows. Those who sent your text messages, equally am I grateful to you. Enjoy a pleasant weekend.